every share I own of MSTR, the amount of Bitcoin in it is always increasing. I think last year the Bitcoin per share increased 74%. And then this year we're only a month in and it's already up 4%. So Bitcoin went up 100x and the dollar, I think MSTR would go up about 1,000x.
So everything goes to zero against Bitcoin except MSTR. You are not concerned about not holding Bitcoin itself, the real asset.
As of this time, I'm just trying to make it out of my parents' basement, and I like MSTR shares.
When the dollar hyperinflates and you look back on this, you're going to be like, man, I wish I'd listened to these people.
I think buying Bitcoin is like, or MSTR is like Apple in 2007 with even way more upside.
What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Byte Federal Podcast. Gladiator, welcome. Thanks for joining us. I've got a question right off the bat. Why did you choose to buy MicroStrategy and not Bitcoin itself?
Yeah, so the reason I bought MSTR strategy instead of Bitcoin was just because I thought I liked how it performed in the past over Bitcoin, and I thought it was always buying more Bitcoin. Therefore, I just thought the current trend would continue where it will outperform Bitcoin in the long run. And that's pretty much it. But I basically thought that it would go up more than Bitcoin, but I like Bitcoin as well.
So you were looking for fiat gains.
I guess so.
You were. Okay,
no, but I guess I guess not quite, because I value the Bitcoin per share increasing. So I think that is what I'm looking at too, not just the number in fiat. But yeah, I guess kind of the fiat gains is what I'm looking at.
If you're looking at valuing the Bitcoin per share, what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, but like basically you're saying so that they'll hold more Bitcoin and therefore the value of your MicroStrategy shares will go up? Is that like...
Yeah, I just think that it's a really cool company where it's more of a Bitcoin acquisition company than just Bitcoin itself. So I just think if I were to hold one thing versus the Bitcoin ETF, say IBIT versus MSTR, for me, I think I'd rather own MSTR because they're always going to be adding Bitcoin. So it's just, to me, I think it's going to outperform the Bitcoin or the Bitcoin ETFs. And yeah, that's kind of...
Okay. So for those that don't spend as much time maybe on Twitter or X as Gladiator, and I do, we had Gladiator on Bitcoin Center, which is a show hosted by Byte Federal that Paul Tarantino and Cedric record. So Gladiator, we had you on like just after the 100K party. I actually had met your dad at the party. I don't think that we met, but you had met Cedric. And a lot of people, I mean, myself at least, just assumed that you were a Bitcoiner. And so somebody came into my comments. You were like feuding with somebody and I defended you. I was like, Gladiator is such a Bitcoiner. And somebody came into my comments and they were like, he doesn't even own any Bitcoin. And I was like, no way, that can't be true. And it turns out that had been true. But since then, you bought a little bit of Bitcoin and you have it in cold storage?
Yeah. So I will say this. I did encourage my dad. I really hammered on him starting in October because he had a bunch of gold stocks and it's all in his retirement, whatever. So I basically hammered on him to buy either MSTR or IBIT. So he did buy a lot of Bitcoin through the IBIT ETF.
Do you understand that it's not real Bitcoin? It's Bitcoin.
Yeah, I understand that you don't have it in self-custody. Yeah. But I still think it's better than anything else in the retirement than gold stocks, for example. But
totally. But
yeah, for me personally and what I'm managing, I only own MSTR, so I'm fully ported. And then I guess I did set up. I did learn the technology recently of what the hot wallet and the cold storage. So I basically learned how that works, and I guess I technically own a couple sats. But yeah, I did want to learn how that works, and a guy named John, Bitcoin Pilot, helped me figure that out. So I did learn a lot and that was really cool because I learned the value of Bitcoin as a store of value, and basically better than gold. And I could go on about that, but through the cold storage, I learned more of the freedom aspect and how it can really. And especially if you're currently in the US, I know a lot of Bitcoiners probably feel they really don't trust the government and they want it in cold storage and they think the government could seize it. But me personally, I don't think that's a threat anytime soon in the US. But if I were living in Nigeria or some country
Mm-hmm.
with 30% inflation per month, and they're trying to
Right.
seize your wealth and they don't let you, the cold storage makes complete sense in a situation like that. So the government can't seize your wealth and so you can move it out of the country. And so
Okay.
if you were in a third world country, you wanted to come to the US and the government was going to, because I remember growing up, I played golf and there was he ended up becoming a pro golfer, but he was from Zimbabwe and his family was
Mhm.
wealthy over there. And the whole currency collapsed, I think. And they were very wealthy, but when they left for the US, the country of Zimbabwe basically said you can't take any of your wealth with you. And with
Right.
the old financial systems, they could basically stop you from getting any of your wealth out of the country. But if you had Bitcoin cold storage, from what
Mm-hmm.
I understand and my small understanding of it is you could have moved it all to a Bitcoin cold storage and basically been able to transport your wealth, all of your wealth to the US with you, and then the Zimbabwe government questions you, you just say you lost it in a boating accident. So that's what it so I can see the total value of it from freedom. Me
Right.
personally, I'm not really maybe I should, but I'm not that worried about that in my current situation. So that's why I'm all in
Okay.
MSTR. But I can see
So,
why that's very valuable for the world and how it helps keeps the governments from seizing people's wealth, etc.
right. All right. So that it's true that, we've seen fiat currencies hyperinflate all around the world. I'm not sure if you're familiar with like the banking crisis in Lebanon. We saw what happened in Nigeria, obviously Venezuela. If you're not, have you ever looked at the timeline about what happened in Venezuela when the Bolivar's hyperinflated?
No, I know kind
Okay.
of what happened with Venezuela, but not. I just know it all went terrible, but I don't really know the
Right. So
exact
a
details.
lot of people don't know like how successful Venezuela was and the economy was flourishing. Like Venezuela itself is a very rich country. And so if you go back, the process of the complete deterioration of Venezuela really happened over like 10 to 20 years. And I think to me it sounds like you are not at all worried about the dollar hyperinflating. Is that accurate?
No, that's not true. I'm very worried. I think the dollar is inflating,
Right.
and that's why I like Bitcoin. And that's why I like MSTR. But what I'm saying is I don't think the government's going to seize my MSTR shares.
You've been vocal about like supporting Trump. I really encouraged people to vote for Trump because the alternate was communism. And I think under the current administration, it was a big win for freedom and for Bitcoin, and that it's unlikely that we get like, do you know what a 6102 attack was when they confiscated gold? Yeah, so they basically confiscated everybody's gold. And of course, I think it only had like a 30% rate of compliance. Like most people didn't actually turn their gold in, but they labeled you, they said that you had to turn your gold in and they labeled you a criminal. And a lot of Bitcoiners felt like, given the trajectory that we were on prior to the most recent election, that that was a very real possibility. That they do something where they try and confiscate gold. But as you mentioned, it actually can't be confiscated if you have it in cold storage. Whether you've lost it in a boating accident or you just are unwilling to comply or you move somewhere with more friendly jurisdiction, they cannot, they can try to compel you to hand your Bitcoin in, but they can't just turn it off the way that they can with the dollars and with the banking system and dollars and things like that. You mentioned you don't, not feeling like the United States was at risk of facing a currency crisis the way that other countries have.
Oh well, I think it could eventually lead to that, but I think it will be the last to
Mhm.
go. But I think that well, the main thing is I don't think they're going to go down and collapse at maybe they will, but I don't think they're going to be stopping and seizing everyone's wealth and making it so you can't leave. But
Right.
that's kind of the theory. But yeah.
Okay, so that's like the unconfiscatable piece of it. But the other piece of it is it sounds to me like you're like still measuring all of your gains in the dollar, right?
So,
So you're
so
up
if
X
the dollar
percent.
collapsed, so I am a theory that the
Mm-hmm.
dollar is getting printed and it's eventually going to
Right.
maybe not hyperinflate like that, but it will definitely deteriorate like it always has. But my
Yes.
thing is that will just make the price of Bitcoin one to go to infinity, and MSTR I believe will just go to even more infinity. So that's I don't think that's going to be bad for MSTR.
So you think it's going to stay pegged? So if the dollar, as the dollar is devaluing, the value in dollars of your MSRT shares is just going
MSTR,
to go
yeah.
up and up and up.
Yeah, I think that let's say Bitcoin went up 100x and
Mm-hmm.
the dollar, I think MSTR would go up about 1,000x. So that's my opinion. But so I think that would be bullish for MSTR personally.
So say your total assets, right? So you're looking at incremental or exponential increases in a dollar priced. But if we flip the script, and I don't know if you've seen, Bitcoiners say like 1 Bitcoin still equals 1 Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So if you use Bitcoin as your unit of account and you say, well, instead of trying to increase the portfolio to go up 10x or 1,000x or whatever it is in the dollar price of the portfolio, and you look at it in terms of actually holding the asset itself, you still believe that the shares are ultimately going to be worth more.
So I'm a big believer in MST or Bitcoin's the best asset. Everything's going to go down in terms of it. I think
Right.
literally
So
one of
why
the only
wouldn't you
things
want to
that can.
hold it
Oh yeah.
itself?
Well, that what I was gonna say was I think the only thing that could possibly beat it is
Mm,
MSTR because I view it as more Bitcoin because they're always increasing Bitcoin per share. So think about it. In 10 years, they might have over double the amount of Bitcoin per share that they do currently. So my every share I own of MSTR, the amount of Bitcoin in it is always
mm.
increasing. I think last year the Bitcoin per share increased 74%, and then this year we're only a month in and it's already up 4%. So yeah, I think for hardcore Bitcoiners, in obviously they just want to own Bitcoin, but if you think of MSTR in terms of Bitcoin terms, it is always appreciating because when they run the ATMs, they're always diluting less than they're buying because they have a
Uh-huh.
premium. So then it's basically a Bitcoin acquisition company. So the Bitcoin per share is always increasing. So even if you think of it in terms of Bitcoin, I think it's a great investment for me personally.
Yeah.
And then long term, I think that there's cool things that they can do with my Bitcoin. I have a space I do with this guy named
Mm-hmm.
LA Dozer who does the AI art for Micahel Saylor. And he makes jokes about long term, every MSTR shareholder is going to go to Mars and get castles because they're going to need perfect money on Mars. And then strategy will develop Mars with cool real estate. But yeah, I think they could become a Bitcoin bank or something. So I
Okay.
think there's some value in owning the most Bitcoin in the world and in having the Bitcoin per share always increase. So that's kind of my theory. But yeah, I
Right.
understand where you're saying where Bitcoin
What
it's
ha- what happens if something happens to them, right? So you're saying they, as in the company of
yeah.
MicroStrategy. So you're placing this massive bet, and we know that that's what you're doing. You know that that's what you're doing, and but it's still at the end of the day a company run by a person or a board of directors, right? And
Yeah.
what happens if something happens?
That's true. That's I guess there is a human element that Bitcoin doesn't have where it's
Right.
increased risk, but I'm a risk taker and
You
I
think
like the company. So
you think the increased risk, like, so you're saying the trade-off basically is increased risk because there's a company and people involved, but
yeah.
on the flip side of that, that increases the potential for upside in dollar terms.
Yeah, I think well, even if you think in Bitcoin terms, I don't plan on
Mm-hmm.
doing this, but I think if someone were to buy a bunch of MSTR today, let's say
Right.
you bought 97K dollars worth of MSTR shares, which is one Bitcoin today, I
Okay.
think theoretically in 10 years you might be able to buy 3 Bitcoin with that because I think it's going to outperform. So well, with that being said, I'm not gonna for all these really Bitcoin maxis. They get upset at me because
Right.
I'm not. I just got into it and I like MSTR and I don't really own any Bitcoin, but I think that long term MSTR could outperform Bitcoin, and then you could. I don't plan on doing this, but you could rotate some of that and buy even more Bitcoin. But I guess what
All
was
right,
the question?
I have a
I
question.
lost track.
I'm going to ask you a new question. So, okay, I think I understand. Like, I understand where you're coming from. Have you ever seen those charts for houses? And
Yeah.
the house, is worth this much. So, if you go back like 5 or 10 years, you would have probably needed 100, 1,000 Bitcoin and you would have gotten a house. And then you do the dollar comparison. And that rift is only going to grow, right? Because the dollar is worth less and less and less. And Bitcoin is worth more and more and more. So your thesis basically is that you think holding those shares ultimately is going to lead to the ability to purchase more Bitcoin.
If I were to, I plan on being a long term shareholder, but maybe I'll
You're
buy
never
Bitcoin.
selling.
Maybe I'll buy. Yeah, I don't plan on ever selling, but maybe I'll
Okay.
buy some Bitcoin separately down the road with I don't know new
Mm-hmm.
sources of income. But no, I think if you look at the last 5 years, literally the only thing
Right.
that's been able to outperform Bitcoin is
Mm-hmm.
MSTR, and that's because they're the first company that realizes that Bitcoin's a once in a lifetime technology, and they're utilizing that
Right.
in their. So yeah, I think that I pretend I'm really dumb, and I think the current trend could continue, and MSTR will be the only thing that outperforms Bitcoin. And that being said, I think Bitcoin will have a crazy future, and it could go up 100 times in fiat terms, like you said, in the next 10 years. And yeah, everything will go down in terms of Bitcoin, except for maybe a company that realizes everything goes down in terms of Bitcoin and always buys more Bitcoin.
So everything goes to zero against Bitcoin except MSTR.
Yeah, I think companies that are on the Bitcoin standard where they're actually
Mm-hmm.
viewing things, because Micahel Saylor, big hardcore Bitcoiners should appreciate what he's doing because he does things in terms of Bitcoin. He says Bitcoin per share always increases.
Right.
So the TradFi guys and the Wall Street guys say, well, no money was made because you can't even price that in dollars. Well, he's saying hardcore Bitcoiners should be able to appreciate that every strategy he's doing is leading to more Bitcoin per share. So he's actually in his last earnings call, he actually dumbed it down a little bit for TradFi guys. So he normalized
Okay.
the Bitcoin per share in terms of like the Bitcoin yield. He did a Bitcoin
Right.
dollar gain so that they could value it. But yeah, I think that even if you're pricing everything in terms of Bitcoin, because everything goes down in terms of Bitcoin, MSTR is increasing. They're the company that's actually going out and saying everything goes down in terms of Bitcoin. Therefore, I want to buy as much as I can and increase Bitcoin yield. So yeah, I think long story short, I think even if you are valuing things in Bitcoin, I think there's
Mm-hmm.
real value that MSTR possesses. And I think you could think of it separately from it's not really more Bitcoin, which Micahel Saylor says, well, I guess it is, but it's kind of a company that's just it's a Bitcoin acquisition company. So if you believe in
Sure.
real estate, you
Mm-hmm.
might invest in a company in 17, I don't know, 1850 that decided all they're going to do is buy up all the New York City real estate. That
Right.
company might do better buying that stock than buying a real estate property. So that's kind of what I view it as. I think it's a Bitcoin acquisition company that also holds it and they're never selling.
There's no one-to-one redemption, is there? Like you can't say, okay, now give me my Bitcoin.
No. That's
You'd
not the
have to exit
plan.
to dollars.
You'd have to if you I don't plan on doing this, but if your end goal was to buy Bitcoin,
Mm-hmm.
you'd have to sell it and then you use the funds to buy Bitcoin and then you'd probably have to pay taxes or whatever.
Right. Yeah, you have to pay capital gains tax on the sale.
Yeah.
So you are not concerned about not holding Bitcoin itself, the real asset.
As of this time, I'm just trying to
Right.
make it out of my parents' basement and I like MSTR shares.
And what do you need to do to get out of the basement? You need to make an X dollar figure. So it's dollars that you need.
No, I just need to get to the point where I feel like it makes financial sense. But right now, I'm trying to save money, so I want to have as many MSTR shares as possible. So,
You're trying to save money to buy more shares, not more sats. Man, when the dollar hyperinflates and you look back on this, you're going to be like, man, I wish I'd listened to these people.
Well, I don't understand. Even if the dollar hyperinflates,
Yeah.
all the Bitcoin companies are going to go to the moon too. I don't understand the theory of
Well,
that.
maybe. I mean, maybe. It's a possibility, right? But it's also a possibility that the entire stock market crashes and burns to the ground. Then what do you do?
Yeah. If Bitcoin goes to infinity, I'll be fine regardless. But
And, well, that's not true. That is predicated on the existing structures staying in place, right? Because ultimately, what you're buying are shares,
oh yeah,
and the shares are traded on the stock market. So you need that structure to stay in place,
yeah, I guess so. And then
right?
I got my
So
dad to
the
buy some iBit, so
right.
I guess you have to trust BlackRock with that. So I guess I don't own any. I own very few actual cold storage, so I can see the argument, but I don't know. I think this is all very bullish for everything I've for if the dollar collapses and Bitcoin
Mm-hmm.
goes to infinity, I think I'd
Right.
be very happy personally. But we'll see.
What if they shut down the stock market, or they make some new rules like, oh, you can't cash out, or you can't, we're
If that
worried
was
about
going
your
to happen,
safety.
I
Yeah.
feel like if that were going to happen,
Mm-hmm.
there'd be some signs. And I would, I don't know. I just don't, especially with Trump in office and Elon running, I am just very
Right.
bullish on America right now. So that's not even a concern I have right now. But I think if I were living in Canada with Trudeau or Australia, maybe then I'd
Yeah.
value this more. But as of this
Are
point,
you
I really like the way our government's heading with Doge and kind of cleaning it all up.
So, I could not agree with you more. Like, I got a lot of shit for supporting Trump, and everybody was like, oh, whatever. Um, but the thing is so I lived in DC for 12 years. I've seen a lot of election cycles, right? And I'm super bullish and like white pilled on everything that's happening right now. Um, but the United States works on these 4-year cycles, right? So what happens if we end up or just let's go back and let's just say Trump didn't win
Yeah.
and the new communist regime came in and put a bunch of like rules in place. You mentioned Canada and what happened with Trudeau and stuff. Are you familiar with what happened with the Canadian trucker movement?
Yeah, I actually talked about that a little bit in one of my videos. So that's kind of
You did.
the argument for, but probably nobody saw it. But it was just a small video. But I said that cold storage, the reason it's so
Yeah,
valuable is, I mean, the government said these people are doing protests, which by the way were right. They were protesting like communism, COVID policies, and
right.
the government just seized their funds and allowed them not to get paid
Yeah,
basically, and that's where people were sending money in or sending Bitcoin or using Bitcoin cold storage. The government, even
right.
if they wanted to, they couldn't have touched it.
Exactly. So, wait, all right. Let's say that Trump had not won. Like you saw what happened with the January 6th protesters,
Yeah.
even people who were not violent. There were people that were in jail who weren't even in DC on January 6th. So I think that's a really comparable like comparison to what was happening with the Canadian trucker movement. So people like you and me who were cheering on Trump, I mean, we could be labeled as enemies of the state and they could lock us down, right? And if they do that, then your shares are not accessible.
Yeah, well, that is a fair argument, but honestly, I think the whole world changed, and we don't really have to worry about the short term. The moment Elon Musk
Right.
bought X, because on it, to me, people just kind of disregard this, but I think Trump would have lost in a landslide if Elon didn't buy X, because
I actually agree with that.
The only reason Trump's not hated right now is because the
Yeah.
media has shifted to a fair debate because Elon bought X. So
Right.
99% of people are just brainwashed robots. So they're
Mm-hmm.
just seeing content from Elon now that Trump's good. So now they don't dislike him. And now all the
Right.
truth's being shared where I don't even believe that Democrats can win the next 10 years, like anything, because X is free and they're just getting
Right.
exposed daily. And every day that X is a free platform and the left is exposed, I think it's very hard to see them winning again in the next 12 years because the only reason they ever won is because they controlled the media and controlled the narrative.
Right.
Now that it's a free landscape, I just don't see a possibility or maybe I'm underestimating the deep state, but I don't see a possibility where the left can even win at this point unless so
You're such a white pill.
I think Elon buying X
Mm-hmm.
and having speech free is the reason why this is all going to work out so beautifully. And honestly, it's the reason why we're going to get a Bitcoin strategic reserve is because Elon bought X, and then that's going to cause Bitcoin to erupt and all that. And I
So
don't know. I just think,
you're bullish on freedom.
yeah, I'm bullish on freedom, and I'm also bullish on the direction of our American government. I think we were leading down a path to what you were talking about of absolute communism, and that's why
Mm-hmm.
it was very hard to be hopeful. But at this point, I think it's the other way. I think now that every day that free speech exists on X,
Right.
it's just I think that the average person goes more towards the freedom side, and it's just very hard for them to enforce their communism agenda every day. X's free speech because people forget in the 2020 election leading up to that,
Mm-hmm.
literally every post Donald Trump or any person did exposing anything would be,
Right.
if it started to go viral, they'd remove it as misinformation, and then they'd put everyone who said the most crazy things on the left pro communism, and they'd put that on the trending page. So it was really a propaganda mechanism on the entire population. And now
Yeah.
it's completely neutral, and free speech is is actually get so anything that goes viral exposing the government or all this stuff now is able to, they don't remove it. And if anything, Elon's actually pushing the freedom argument. So it's just, I'm very bullish not only on Bitcoin and MSTR, but honestly America at this point. And so I think every day we're going to return more to sanity, and we're going to stop all this woke stuff. And so maybe I'm being naive, but I'm not really fearing the government going after me at this point. I just think we're at this point of no return where the truth's getting exposed, and there's more people like me than people like the communists. So I think that we have a very bright future in the US. But that being said, if I were living in, say, Canada or Australia, even those countries, because they have free speech on X, even those countries are going to go more towards the freedom side over time. I think the whole world's changing, but I can totally see the value in the Bitcoin cold storage and the protection against this. Let's say Kamala had one, and let's say Elon had never bought X, and every person like me was being labeled a far an extremist and a threat to
Right.
democracy. Then I might value it more because then I'd actually be scared that I'd be labeled a crazy person, put in jail, and have
Yep.
my funds stolen. Then
Right.
I definitely value the the cold storage more and Bitcoin
Right.
itself. But at this point, I actually am almost as bullish on America and the future government. I don't trust government, but I'm bullish on it becoming much better and getting cleaned up from what it was. So
A
I want
return
less
to
government.
freedom.
Yeah, return to freedom, less
Yeah.
interference. And it's crazy, the does. I haven't followed it that closely, but from what I see, they're basically the entire government has basically been exposed for collecting massive tax dollars to
Oh
spend on
yeah.
either nothing or woke agenda. So that's
Yeah.
crazy. If I had worked my whole life and made a bunch of money, I'd be furious right now, knowing most of my money that I got taxed
Right.
on just went to absolutely nothing.
Oh, trust me, we are. I am, and that's why I take as much of my money out of the system as possible by putting it in Bitcoin and putting it in cold storage. It will never see dollars again. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, look, you lay out a very strong case for optimism and for taking the white pill, and I agree with you. Like, I was not even on Twitter until Elon bought it. Um, so I agree. I think Elon kind of saved freedom. Without him, Trump would have never won. And with this big change, we've seen a huge shift in the Overton window, and the woke nonsense is kind of
Yeah.
dying. And there's like literally reverberations around the world
Yeah.
where people are like returning to sanity and freedom is returning. Um, and that's amazing. Like, I don't even want to give a black pill to that white pill, but you have to also never forget what happened, right? So I think like during the last 4 years, I spent a lot of time looking at like how did we get this close to communism, right? And so a lot of people feel like be think people think that communism was like defeated, and so they stopped being weary of it and warding it off. And we just kind of went through this period of like totally believing we defeated communism, and it doesn't need to be like, awareness doesn't need to be spread, right? And so you go through these cycles, like we saw it get really, really close. And I think it's important to remember how quickly that can happen. I totally agree. I think that like we could have 12 years of more freedom, a return to sanity, strong dollar, TBD. But I do urge you to think about what could happen past this next cycle, right? So even if all of that you've laid out comes true, kicked off by Elon buying Twitter, Trump wins, and we have like 12 years of prosperity and a return to freedom. Ultimately, we are eventually going to see some sort of catastrophic downfall. All fiat eventually fails. And so I would urge you to just take a small portion of your fiat gains
Oh
and
yeah,
hold them in Bitcoin cold
yeah.
storage itself. And that way,
Just,
you know,
just, just to be clear, I do think that even with this, I still don't believe in the dollar. I still think that's going to zero. But yeah,
so why are you trying to earn more of it?
I don't even think of it. I think that MSTR is just going to outperform everything. So
But
I think
in
even,
dollar terms.
but even in Bitcoin terms, I think the Bitcoin per share is always increasing. So I think there's real
But
value
you
in that.
don't own that Bitcoin. Your value is returned to you in dollars, right?
I guess so.
Okay, so if the dollar's going to zero,
Which I agree that's happening. We, by the way, today had a higher expected CPI, which was, I mean, that's already a fabrication of data, but it's way higher
yeah,
than it is.
because
But
they
yeah,
want to make Trump look bad.
the inflation is already, it's probably, it seems like I've no actual interpretation of this, but to me, it feels like 20% a year.
Oh, when you said earlier, about was it Zimbabwe having 30% inflation? I didn't want to interrupt you, but what I was thinking was like, well, we're almost there. I mean, if you
Oh
look
yeah. Well,
back at
well,
pre-COVID,
I said Nigeria has 30% a month, which is a little different.
yeah,
That's,
a month
that's,
is different. But if you go back and look at things like pre-COVID,
oh yeah.
we're up 30,
Well,
40, 50%.
I actually totally agree with what Bitcoiners say on the dollar is collapsing. I totally
Right.
can see that. I'm not arguing that. I think
But your solution is just to earn more and more dollars exponentially so that the collapse doesn't affect you. Is that like,
so. I think there's gonna be two units of account.
okay?
There's gonna be Bitcoin. And there's gonna be MSTR shares. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh.
So each MSTR share is gonna get you a castle on Mars. Each Bitcoin's
hmm
gonna be worth, I don't know, more than anyone could imagine. Why was there
So
balloons going off? By the way, I don't
I don't know.
know.
I thought you did that. I thought that was like an MSTR going to the moon situation.
No, I just saw that on my screen.
All right. I don't know if I've done much to convince you
No, no,
to
I can
hold
see your
more Bitcoin
argument.
in
I think
cold
I should
storage.
realistically get some
Yeah.
Bitcoin in cold storage because right now I just
Okay.
have a couple sats, which is almost nothing. But no,
Right.
I see the argument.
So
By
I
the
would
way, I
encourage,
love Bitcoin. I just like
I
MSTR
know.
more.
I would encourage you, yes, to get more Bitcoin in cold storage, get some Bitcoin in cold storage. So I know you went through, like, you set up a hardware wallet and got a little bit more familiar with like how that process worked. But the other thing that I would encourage you to do is like think in Bitcoin terms. So if you believe that the dollar is eventually going to zero, then we do need a unit of account, right?
Yeah.
And you very well may be right that in the short, like near to medium or even long term horizon, if we're thinking like 10 to 12 years, if MSTR is your unit of account, you're really saying that you're keeping track of things in dollars, right? Because a share is valued in
I
dollars.
don't think so. I don't think exactly though, because one of the main things I'm valuing when I look at
Mm.
MSTR and what I'm seeing with what I like from the company is the Bitcoin gain or yield, which is how much is the Bitcoin per share going up. And I guess you can
But
make the
that's not
argument.
Bitcoin going to you.
Yeah, yeah, it's Bitcoin in the company. I understand
Right.
that.
Right.
I guess it's a little different. I'm trusting. I'm placing my faith in Micahel Saylor and strategy, which
Yeah.
hardcore Bitcoiners do not like placing faith in other people. So I can
It's
understand the
true.
argument.
I mean, I like Saylor. I'm a huge fan of what he's doing. I think that it's awesome. But I think that that is really the thesis is it's not about evaluating the person. It's really about making getting yourself into a situation where you don't have to evaluate anyone or anything, and you're just storing your value in something that doesn't rely on any person, any company, any balance sheet, or
Yeah.
even any government structure, right?
I
Because this
guess,
is all,
yeah.
yeah,
I guess the difference between me and most Bitcoiners, where I completely see the value and understand the reason why Bitcoin is the cure to so many things and is perfect money. I guess I'm looking at it more from an investor standpoint as opposed
hmm,
to a person's savings to prevent the whole government from stealing or from everything collapsing. I'm viewing this
right.
more as maybe the dollar doesn't actually go to zero. Maybe it stays afloat, and then maybe the Bitcoin is the greatest technology ever. And MSTR and strategy is Apple in 2007 with 10 times the upside due to the absolute scarcity of Bitcoin. And maybe that's the invest. Maybe it's the greatest investment I could have ever made, and it's going to do all these amazing things. And maybe Bitcoin turns out to be this amazing what we all know it's going to be, which is the greatest technological innovation probably of our lifetimes, and it's perfect money. But maybe the whole system, maybe MSTR can have a future while Bitcoin also does all these amazing things. That maybe that's my thesis. Maybe I'm not 100% a Bitcoin maxi if everything's going to collapse and then even the MSTR shares. I think that that's not quite going to happen, and there's still going to be a financial system, and the stock market's still going to exist, and MSTR will still be this. Will be the number one company in the world, and I think that it's this crazy opportunity. So I guess that's my one difference where I'm a little bit I like the
You don't,
investment side of MSTR. But yeah. But I
you,
understand the Bitcoin argument, but I think that I like I like the potential of MSTR a little more. But I guess you could say, well, that's valuing fiat. So I guess maybe, but but doesn't by the way, doesn't Micahel Saylor even think that Bitcoin I don't think Bitcoin necessarily replaces the dollar as a currency within 50 years. I think it's more of a store of value. Well, I think it would be a better currency. I just don't see that coming anytime soon. Totally. I can already tell you're not liking what I'm saying.
no, honestly, it doesn't matter. Like, my opinion is irrelevant to what you're going to do or not do. I was just genuinely curious. Like, you seem so much like a Bitcoiner, right? And we know that you're a super MSTR advocate. Um but I genuinely was shocked to learn that you weren't holding some Bitcoin in cold storage. I
Well,
was
so
like,
by
there's
the
no
way,
way.
I do own a little bit now, but people forget I just got into this Bitcoin and MSTR stuff literally
Right.
4 months ago. I'm not people think I've been around for forever. I'm just brand new to this. I didn't even under
Right.
the first time I even understood the value of Bitcoin was when I watched the Micahel
Mhm.
Saylor video in October 1st or whatever, the last days of September, and I said, "Wow, this is why Bitcoin's the future." So
Right.
I didn't even know what cold storage was until I don't know a
Right.
month ago.
I know I saw that. I mean, honestly, I just wanted to have this conversation with you because, well, to like understand your perspective, but also I think it's an important conversation to have because I think there's a ton of people out there that are in your shoes, right? They are new to Bitcoin. Maybe they're not in Bitcoin at all, like you, and they're trying to figure out like, I think people feel like they missed the boat. They look
Oh
back and they're
yeah.
like, oh, I should have bought Bitcoin at 50. I should have bought it at 30. And so they look for other ways and other trades to make, other plays because they think that they missed the boat. But one thing that I would really encourage you to do since you are new is to one look at how you're valuing all the different factors here, right? You're talking about like valuing risk and like all of those things. But look at some of these other things that you maybe haven't spent as much time studying, like the collapse of fiat currencies, which
Yeah.
is inevitable. Um,
See,
the
this is a good book for me to read. It's
That's a great
I
book.
I heard this one's good for that. It's called Broken Money, but I think it
Yes.
goes over some of the collapses.
It does. So read that book. Larry Lepard just wrote a new book that's also a good one called The Big Print. Have you heard of that? It's new.
No, it's funny because I
Um,
had a little bit of X beef with Larry Lepard. That's
what'd you do? Larry is one of my best friends. What'd you do with Larry? Were
so
you
I just did
talking shit?
I just did some funny post making fun of boomers. It was satire, and then he
Okay.
goes, and I said, I'm the man in the arena, whatever. It was just a joke. And then
Uh-huh.
he goes, you're not the man in the arena. You're just a spoiled, whiny brat. And then I replied in all caps. And
Oh,
then I replied in all caps, okay, boomer. Meanwhile, I'm just laughing. It's all jokes, but I think he took it seriously. And he said some curse words at me and then blocked
yeah.
me.
Oh boy. Okay.
I
Well,
didn't know I didn't know who he was, but I just thought I
right.
was just making jokes.
Okay, we're gonna mend this because you would love Larry so much. He's a really, really smart guy, and he was a big gold bug. So actually, it's somebody for your dad to look at.
Oh yeah, my
Um,
dad. By the way, I've completely converted my dad. My dad was a
yeah,
complete he was his whole idea was the dollar is getting devalued. I need to
right,
protect myself. So he was all into gold. And then this past year, I've just completely convinced him on basically switched all that to iBit and then a
right.
little bit of MSTR. So that's kind of
Okay,
but he's still in the financial system, obviously. He's not owning
right.
anything in cold storage. But yeah, I think,
We're
what were we
gonna
saying?
get
Oh yeah,
in.
I can see the gold bugs. They have the right idea, but I just think they're
Yeah.
playing the wrong vehicle.
Well, some people might say you're playing the wrong vehicle.
Potentially. I
It,
think it's going to do fine, though.
in dollar terms, you might be right. So, one thing that, like, one of the strategies that we try to encourage people that are new, like you or your dad, is to say just get off of zero, and that's get off of zero Bitcoin, right? So you kind of dipped your toes in that pond. You set up a cold storage. You're working on the education there, and all I want to do is encourage you and everybody else that's listening. So, like, I wanted to have this conversation with you because I think a lot of people feel exactly how you feel, right? Like,
Yeah,
ah,
that's.
shit, like,
Oh, yeah. So, by the way, for one, I'm actually a firm believer that, yeah, we
mhm,
are so early in Bitcoin and people want to know what the next Bitcoin is. The next Bitcoin is Bitcoin. And I think
that's
it's like
right.
the internet in the early 2000s and it's about to hit this exponential S curve and it's going to go crazy. So I totally agree with you there. And I do see the value in what I'm doing because I've kind of turned into this like public figure without really knowing anything, which is hilarious. And and I think it's valuable for a lot of people because a lot of people don't actually know much and they're just getting into Bitcoin and
Right.
MSTR. So I kind of represent this new generation who's
You
dipping their
do.
toes in Bitcoin and MSTR for the first time. So I guess
You do.
it's
And
funny.
I just want to push you a little bit further along your journey towards understanding the freedom and unconfiscatable piece of it
Yeah.
so that,
Yes.
we might have, look, we're on the same page. We might have 12 years of amazing growth and a return to freedom. And that's what I'm hoping for. But there's a couple of possible scenarios. I mean, what if the deep state, like, takes control back? Like, you never know, right? Like, look what they did in Canada. What if everybody gets labeled a freaking terrorist? Or
Yeah.
let's just fast forward. Let's say we do have 12 amazing years and then people get complacent. I was trying to say something about communism before, how, like, when we think things are going well, we sort of stop paying attention. And
Yeah.
so these things happen, like, in a cyclical way. So
And I guess it
ultimately,
could.
at some
Yeah.
point, like, shit might hit the fan again, and I want
I still
you
feel
to
like
be
that's
prepared.
happening. I still think
What's
the
happening?
economy is completely broken right now. I saw some article
Right.
yesterday on Gen Z are upset and millennials at boomers for telling them they don't work hard enough when they can't afford houses. So the economy is already broken in a way because I think due to the lack of Bitcoin and the lack of a proper store of value, this whole
Right.
and the money printer, not only
You're
did
so
everything in
close. You're so close to
the
understanding.
not only did everything inflate, and which made
Mhm.
the boomers all rich because they owned houses on mortgages. So
Right.
when they're leveraging their house on some, and then the money supply doubles, their investments are going to go up so much compared to their invest to how much they put in. So the and people people didn't understand any other store of value. They didn't know Bitcoin. And so people just use houses as savings tools. Not only that, but
Right.
a bunch of people started buying houses because they started thinking it was the best savings tool. So everyone around me, all they want to do is buy houses they're not going to use for investment. So the
Yep.
price of the housing is so much higher than the actual utility of living in a house. So,
Because
and
it's
not
being
only
used
that,
as a store of value.
yeah. And not only that, but there's also tax issues where people who
Right.
bought mortgages are stuck at their old interest rate. So there's no one selling. So the whole thing's broken. So all my
Yes.
friends want to buy houses and they can't even buy it. The only way anyone could buy it almost, I mean, there are some people as if their parents bought them a house, whatever. But so the whole thing's broken in terms of the housing market
What
and
fixes it?
Bitcoin. Because
Oh,
what's going to
okay.
happen is people are going to realize it's a better store of value, and then people are
Exactly.
going to take some. They're going to stop using housing as the only savings vehicle. They'll put some in Bitcoin, and then the price of a house it
Mm-hmm.
won't drop in dollar terms, but it will obviously continue to drop in Bitcoin terms, and then the price of a house will return to its value of its proper utility value, which is way lower
Right.
than it is currently. That's part of the reason why I live in my parents' house is because the price of housing these days is so
Yeah.
overinflated. I don't value that anywhere near as much as the cost it is right now. For even in a, it's all so inflated. And I compared to the actual how much you'd actually dollar wise value a living space, it's
Mm-hmm.
crazy right now. So I think Bitcoin's going to help solve that by creating a store of value. And
Yeah.
but
And you know who's
with
gonna end up like as the new class? The people holding the Bitcoin.
No, yeah, I completely agree. I think there's going to be a crazy generational wealth shift. The people, the only thing I'll correct you is it's also going to be the MSTR shareholders.
Oh, okay. I mean, we're gonna see, right? TBD on that. Look, I
But
like
I
MicroStrategy.
honestly am very, to
Yeah.
be honest, I'm very bullish, obviously on
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin. But I
Mm-hmm.
love the companies that are using Bitcoin as a unit of account and increasing
Right.
Bitcoin per share. And there's a couple of them. There's Metaplanet. There's
Yeah.
SMLR. Even I think GameStop posted a photo with
That's gonna be
Sailor.
awesome. They did.
That's so I think so I have no idea what's going to happen with that company, but I
Right.
think MSTR is the holy grail of those companies, so that's the one I like the most, and I'm all in on that
Okay.
one. But I'm super bullish on
Mm-hmm.
the companies that buy the Bitcoin too. So who knows? Maybe but by the way, I think Bitcoin is going to be. I think buying Bitcoin is like, or MSTR is like Apple in 2007 with even way more upside because I think it's going to be the craziest. It's the craziest shift in I don't
In
know,
dollar
technological
terms.
innovation. Yeah, no, in dollar terms, yeah.
If you're valuing your wealth in dollar terms.
Yeah, I think that it's
Yeah.
going to be. I think it's very early and it's about to explode, and we're going to see there. If you actually think about the amount of capital in Bitcoin right now,
Mm-hmm.
it's nothing. If I go to my local golf course
Right.
and see a bunch of rich boomers,
Right.
every single one of them, maybe outside of my dad, is saying Bitcoin's a scam. I'll never buy that. so,
Yeah.
so no one's even in it yet. People think
I
we're late. If
agree.
I actually go to the golf
We're
course
not
and
late.
talk to them, they'd all think I'm nuts. So no
Right.
one's. If all the rich people start putting a little bit of money in it, that's huge exponential gains. Even without that, just by the companies buying and the governments, it's all going to explode.
Right.
And but yeah, I guess I'm never gonna please the hardcore Bitcoin maxis if I own a lot of MSTR. I understand that. But I
All
do
right.
see I completely see why they've been so successful the last 10 years.
Yes. Okay.
But and by the way,
I
I think that they're
agree.
gonna be just as successful the next 10 years. I think it's very early.
Right. Right. So I agree that like all the companies using Bitcoin as a unit of account, putting Bitcoin on their balance sheet, it's important to support those and I think it's awesome. I'm super like glad to see you coming into the ecosystem and supporting all of that. I just encourage you to do more research and read that book that you have.
Yeah, so
And
I read my first
yeah,
Bitcoin book, The Bitcoin Standard. I read all of it
yes.
but the last 10 pages. I got a little bored, but I moved on. I decided I want to move on to this book. And
Okay.
I got a couple books here. I got this when I went to the Micahel Saylor party,
Yeah.
he had 3 copies of this book on
Uh-huh.
his desk. So I bought
Right.
a couple copies of this for me and my family. The
Good job.
Bitcoin Super Cycle. So
Right.
I haven't read it, but I think this
I
is
haven't read
in
that
a,
one. I've read
so
Broken Money.
so when at Sailor's party, he had one book out for everyone to look
Okay.
at, and it was this
Yeah.
book. So I think there's got to be
Uh-huh.
some useful information, and yeah, I think that's going to be the super cycle. I don't think we're going to. I just think we're seeing a whole new wave of institutional adoption, nation
Yeah.
states, and ETF inflow. So I really think that we're going to see a huge. The cool thing about Bitcoin
Mm-hmm.
that really excites me is other commodities, you see an exponential shift increase in demand. Like let's say
Mm-hmm.
silver had an exponential increase shift in demand tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what would happen was everyone around the world would just work harder to create more silver. And so the price would increase temporarily due to the demand shift, but then everyone would just work harder to capitalize on that. And then the price would shift back down because the supply would increase. The thing about Bitcoin is the supply is fixed. There's a set amount
Right.
released each year by the miners. There's 21 million forever. We are currently seeing the exponential increase in demand, and it's only going to erupt. And the supply, it can't, even if people wanted to, they can't work harder to make more. So that's where the price just goes up exponentially in terms of fiat, as you say. And that's when Bitcoin goes to the moon and MSTR goes to Mars. And MSTR, I say this, people get upset because, but it's a little bit of jokes. But MSTR, the M stands for Mars.
So
It's
you're
a Mars
Mars
real estate.
Maxi.
It's a Mars real estate development company, and they're going to need perfect money on Mars, and Bitcoin's that. They can't send gold to Mars, but they're going to be able to send Bitcoin to Mars. So that's
Okay.
that's very bullish. I don't think that's priced in.
Okay. It's probably not yet, but I'm just going to leave you with this. Please take 1% of your fiat gains, put them into Bitcoin cold storage in case you end up stuck on Earth.
Oh yeah, and I have, by the way, the Bitcoin maxes will like this.
Mm-hmm.
Last week I did set up Bitcoin cold storage,
I
and
saw
I
that.
put and I got a couple. I don't. They say not to reveal your stack, but I don't think it matters because I have almost none. But yeah, I have a little over. What is it? I'm not even gonna say, but it's not much money. Not many
That's
sats, but I
okay.
got a couple sats.
You got off of zero Bitcoin in cold storage, right? So
Yeah,
you didn't even have a cold storage setup. You
and
got off
more
zero.
importantly, that now I understand the technology and the use of it more. 'Cause
Exactly.
it's hard to, even
Exactly.
if you read about Bitcoin and read about
Mm-hmm.
cold storage, it's hard to understand it until you get that first person experience with it, and then you really see,
Right.
wow, you can just go off the grid with this. Nobody can even seize it. No one can even tell you have it. So there is definitely an eye-opening experience, not only with the hot wallet, I use that, but also
Yeah.
with the cold storage. And it's cool when you send it to friends and family. I mean, you don't even have to ask permission from the government. They don't even ask your name. None of that. No,
That's
it's just
right.
so you can send it. You could theoretically send it to China overnight, and you don't even have to ask permission from anyone. You can send as much money or as much Bitcoin. I'm stuck on the fiat, but you can send as much Bitcoin as you want to
Right.
China. You don't have to ask for permission. But if you wanted to send, say, $5 million to your friend in China
Mm-hmm.
tomorrow, good luck doing
Mm-hmm.
that in the current banking system. And then good luck doing that if you're on if the government considers you a threat, whatever. But
That's right.
with Bitcoin,
You've
nobody
made
can stop it. Then my
you've
dad was
made the
previously
argument.
wrong about this. He's kind of come around. So this
Okay.
guy, John, who he kind of educated on this, and this is true.
Yeah.
My dad thought, well, I'm bullish on Bitcoin now because I
Mm-hmm.
thought the government was going to stop it, but instead they chose to embrace it. So,
Right.
and then and that's kind of true, but not really. The reason the government embraced it is because you can't stop Bitcoin because it's peer to peer. Like even if the government wanted to, they can't stop it. So they have no choice to embrace it. So Bitcoin is this
You're right.
unstoppable technology. So,
It's
and we are
unstoppable if you hold
that
your
being
own keys.
that being that's true. But that being said, it's very good. While the government did have no choice to embrace it, it is very good
Mm-hmm.
that they are embracing it because then the price is going
Right.
to erupt. But I guess hardcore Bitcoin maxis, they act like they don't care about the price because they just care about Bitcoin. But
Right.
I still want to see it go up. So me personally, I'm very happy that
Right.
it's getting institutionalized and the nation states are going to start buying and the ETFs and MSTR. What's crazy about MSTR in my strategy is
Uh-huh.
the amount of Bitcoin they're buying alone, I'm pretty sure is more than the amount released by the miners. So we're going to see this supply shock, or there's too much demand basically for Bitcoin not to go to infinity. That's my opinion. So it's just a basic math
Bitcoin.
problem. There's more
Right.
demand than supply. I don't see how this doesn't go to infinity. That's pretty much my opinion.
All right. You've made some valid arguments, and I hope I've encouraged you to think more about holding a small percentage of your
Yeah, yeah.
portfolio in Bitcoin in cold storage.
I
Okay.
should.
So
You
that
should.
nobody can confiscate it and you don't need permission from the government or even the structure of the stock market to exist for your wealth to continue to grow.
You make valid points, and I'll take them seriously.
All
I
right.
agree.
Well, we're glad to have you in the Bitcoin community. I
And
know
now,
that the hardcore maxis are crazy, but I think, they're pushing you in the right direction, and I just want to encourage you to continue
yeah,
in that direction. Study the freedom of it, study, all these things that we've talked about,
I
and
think the
consider, yeah.
I think the thing about Bitcoin is this revolution technology where it really
Mm-hmm.
can cure so much, and it solves so many problems in our economy that are broken, and now everyone just
Right.
wants to be close to the money printer, and it doesn't even reward good work because people my generation can't afford to own anything anyway,
It's
and
true.
it basically destroys all the economic incentives. Which, if perfect money existed like Bitcoin, people would
Right.
be maybe they'd be working on innovating things instead of all my smartest friends from college. All they want to do is work at a hedge fund. Like, that's not really
Right.
creating true value. They could have been innovating and helping create a brighter future. That's what Bitcoin can potentially do. And hardcore Bitcoin maximalists understand this so well that they almost go a little bit crazy, and they start, if someone doesn't agree with every single thing they agree with, they get very upset. But that being said, the strategy works for them, and they're going to win. But it is they get a little overboard, and they're not very nice to new learners, to be honest.
I
'Cause
don't I don't even disagree with that. I've got a couple opinions that I've gotten completely roasted for. And I've said some stuff that like I didn't say exactly what I meant well, and I got totally attacked. So
but
I understand that. It's hard to
yeah,
come
but
in and be new.
that's also the internet, though. I guess to be
Yeah,
honest, the whole internet's like that, where people like to talk smack, and nobody's really
it's
that nice.
true.
So
Yeah.
it's not just Bitcoin maximalists, but yeah,
The internet's
if
a crazy
someone like me
place.
comes out with strong
Mhm.
opinions and says MSTR is going to be the number one company in the world, and it's going to be defeat Apple, all these companies. Obviously, if I say that with conviction, people are going to say some things about me. So I guess it comes with the territory. But
All right. Well, you have got to spend more time studying. You are so close to
yeah,
being like the craziest Bitcoiner that you even know. You're really, really close. So just keep studying. Bitcoin is a journey, right? Like it takes
yeah.
people years to understand. And so
I
start
try to learn a
trying to
little bit.
value.
I try to learn a
Yeah,
little bit every day, read a couple pages of something, watch some videos,
that's
and
good.
so
That's
they will
good.
take. That being said, I yeah, still learning. I'm not a very good reader. I get pretty bored with it, but you're trying to read these books, so that'll be fun. I hope this book. What's your favorite? I'm just curious. What's your favorite Bitcoin book that really opened your eyes?
Oh, it's a tough question. Because I do read a lot. Honestly, you're not gonna like this answer, but you know whose book I think you should read is Larry Lepard's. It's
No, I
called
don't
The
actually
Big
have a
Print.
problem with it. I just thought that was a funny
Yeah. No, we're gonna
interaction.
mend that. You're gonna be best friends. But he talks a lot about, the money being broken, and I think his goal was to take the Bitcoin Standard and Lynn's book and kind of provide more of a narrative to the themes and make it a little bit easier to understand and process because those books are super dense. Like I love them, but they're a little bit like
Yeah.
hard to read, talking about reading like 10 pages
Does this book lead you to
broken
Bitcoin, or
money.
is it just a book
Yes.
about the money? Does it tell you gold, or wasn't Lynn Alden also into gold, or is she just into Bitcoin?
I think she was in fiat, like, or in TradFi, and
But now she's a
so I
hardcore
don't.
Bitcoiner.
She is. That's right, and she probably holds her Bitcoin in cold storage.
No, yeah, I'm definitely gonna read that book.
Yeah,
I've
no, it's a good book. And just think more about what you're valuing and what you consider risk and volatility and the potential for anything to happen. You never know what's going to happen, and you have to look at like what you're relying on, right? So MicroStrategy to Mars, but what if we end up on Earth?
that's a good point. Something to think about.
something to think about. And, consider valuing your portfolio in Bitcoin and maybe even just comparing them, right? So if you do all of the valuations and projections in dollars, and then you also do them in Bitcoin, it's a good way to look at it. You have to factor in real inflation, not just the CPI numbers and all the nonsense that is nonsense. So if you look at like real numbers, and then just continue working to like get off zero, right? So you set up your cold storage. And I think the deeper that your understanding of Bitcoin becomes, the larger percentage of your portfolio that you might want to hold in Bitcoin. And so maybe as time goes on, we're going to hear from you that you put like 1% into Bitcoin cold storage. And then over time, that percent will increase. And so for you and for anybody else that's new and listening, that would be my advice, is just increase your exposure a little bit in terms of what you're actually holding yourself in case everything does collapse. So it's insurance against the system. And the more that you understand, I think the more you're going to want to increase that percentage.
Okay. Well,
Okay.
thanks. I'll take that advice seriously.
All right. Think about it. Thank you for joining us so much. For everybody that's listening that is, maybe new like Gladiator to Bitcoin, follow us along, follow Gladiator, follow myself, follow Byte Federal on X, and join the conversation. And remember, Bitcoin in cold storage is completely uncensorable. So it doesn't matter what you're labeled by the government, nobody can touch you.
What are they going to label Michelle?
Probably a far-right extremist.
What I think's great about what Elon did is he
Yeah.
actually unbanned the actual people who were crazy far-right extremists. So now everyone
Right.
can see that people like us who are just normal people on the right
Normal.
side, we're not actually
Yeah.
far-right. Because that's
I
the important
know.
thing. You have to bring back the people that are actually nuts on the far right so that
Yeah.
people like us look normal.
Exactly.
Because now
Exactly.
no one would think that we're far-right extremists when you actually see the
Right.
crazy people on X now.
I know. I mean, so I was in China and I came back to the US and people literally were like calling me, and this was in 2018. I was not in the United States during the 2016 election. So I came back and I was like, why do you guys hate Trump so much? Like, it's cool if you don't like him, like no big deal, you know what I mean? But like, what's the seriousness? Like why do you think someone's a literal Nazi for voting for this guy, right? And people are like, oh my God, like, how dare you ask us that?
What it was is most people do not actually think for themselves. So
I
I saw
know,
this
it's
in college.
true.
No one
Yeah.
actually has opinions. Their brain works in a way so they want to fit in with what other people say. So they don't even actually look
Mm-hmm.
for the truth. They're just trying to find the consensus and they fit in. Me, I'm the complete
It's
opposite.
true.
I actually like to
I
fit out,
know.
and it actually goes the opposite way for me. If everyone around me is saying one thing, I probably think that's probably not true. So the
Right.
problem, what happened was these organizations, for one, the media, but also the world operates on social media now, and X is the news
Mm-hmm.
platform. So what X did was they censored and banned everyone on the far right.
Yeah.
Everyone on the middle to far right. They either got banned or their speech was limited, so no one saw it. And then what they did was the people working at these organizations, funded probably by the government, they basically gave a megaphone to everyone that's actually on the far left. So then all
Yep.
anyone sees is these crazy people on the left. So then everyone else stuck in the middle to slightly right, or even slightly left, if people in the middle, they look like far right extremists because all anyone sees is the people on the far left, and people are just brainwashed. So they're like, oh my God, you like Trump? You're far right.
Right.
No, you got it all wrong because you can't think for yourselves because you've been brainwashed by these media organizations. So that's what's happening. We are seeing in real time that the whole world's shifting because it is true. 99% of people can't actually think for themselves. So now we have free speech. So now, now they're moving. Now they're actually seeing what far right actually is. And they're seeing that we
Yeah.
are actually just people in the middle.
Normal people. We're totally normal. You and me, Gladiator. We're normal people. No, it's called the Overton window. And you're absolutely right. It got
Yeah.
shifted super left, and we are bringing it back. We're going to make common sense common again.
That's why
And,
people on Bitcoin, that's why I
mm-hmm.
want people on Bitcoin and MSTR
Yeah.
people say they're bullish and they say it's going to go to 200K. Like, why don't we have crazy people like me saying Bitcoin's hitting 1 million this year and MSTR is going to $30,000 per share? You need people that bullish so that the normal
Right.
person looks normal.
It's true.
Saying
It's true.
Bitcoin's going to be 200K at the end of the year isn't actually bullish.
Same
That's
could
my
be said.
opinion.
Don't you think same could be said about Bitcoin maxis?
What do you mean?
So, like, there's this really aggressive, like, shutdown of everything, right? Like, oh no, 100% of everything should be in Bitcoin. But you could say that, like, the same should be said that if we don't push that aggressively, so
Oh
that
yeah.
maybe, like, the average person settles on a small
Yeah, maybe
allocation to
yeah, that's
Bitcoin.
completely true. So
Yeah.
some average person or that's not a Bitcoin maximalist, if they lived in a community where every other person had
Mm-hmm.
100% of their wealth in Bitcoin,
Right.
they probably put at least 50% of their money in Bitcoin because they think it was the
Exactly.
normal thing to do. Whereas if all they hear is people saying Bitcoin is a scam, they're probably not
Mm-hmm.
going to feel comfortable. So there is value in shifting the Overton window. And it is
Right.
important to remember that most people don't actually think for themselves, they just consume information. So it is. And so giving the platform to Bitcoiners is definitely spreading the
Right.
message. So I've tried to help my friends understand it. And even though, yeah, just there's definitely good in orange pilling other people. And by the way, don't try to act normal to these people. Don't say, "Oh, I think Bitcoin's going to go up slightly." You can. It is good to be crazy and to say all the things you believe because it shifts the Overton window.
It's true. We're pushing it back, Gladiator. We're pushing it back to the right and we're bringing sanity back. And I'm valuing my wealth in Bitcoin sats, and we are going to get you off of the fiat mindset little by little.
Okay, it
All
sounds
right.
good.
So you keep studying, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. Like I said before, I think it's an important conversation because I think a lot more people find the position you're in relatable versus maybe some of the Bitcoin maxis who just value everything in Bitcoin and say like, oh, nothing matters to Bitcoin but Bitcoin. Like I feel that way, but I think it's important to bring the conversation back to kind of like why and how we're valuing all of these things, and also shine a light on like the journey. You're newer to Bitcoin. There's a lot of people that are new coming in and kind of trying to decide like, well, where do I put my money and how do I figure these things out? So shedding light on kind of like why you're thinking the way that you are and maybe some of the areas where you can continue to increase your knowledge is super important. So I'm glad we were able to talk some of these things through, and I will see you online.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. I'll see you later.
All right, bye, Gladiator.
So you've heard Bitcoin is the new gold rush by now. As world leaders on all sides have endorsed it as the future of money, and now you're looking to get started, we'll show you how. It's actually easier than you think. First, go to your nearest Byte Federal ATM and turn your cash to coin. Byte Federal has over 1,200 locations around the country with the highest daily limits. Go to our website, bytefederal.com, to find the nearest ATM to you. Log in to any wallet, then create an account, deposit your US cash, and instantly convert it to Bitcoin. That's it. We are the only US manufacturer and operator in the Bitcoin ATM industry, and our US-based live customer service is second to none. Go on, give it a whirl, and don't get left behind. Click the link below.